As a reminder, please turn your mics on and clearly state your name before speaking to ensure that members of the audience can hear you. And please mute your mics when not speaking to eliminate feedback noise. As a reminder, phone attendees will need to press star six to unmute themselves. Because this is a virtual meeting, a roll call vote will be taken for each action item on the agenda. We will now begin the meeting with the roll call of all members. Hannah, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Sapien. I'll start the roll. Jill Duesenberry. Matt Dudley.
Here.
Thank you. Sean Banda. Jason Crampton. Jose Macias.
Present.
Thank you. Jeff Graves.
Here.
Thank you. Don Coomer.
Hi, this is Dawn.
Thank you. Stephanie Bubenheim.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Chair Link.
Here.
Thank you. Christine McMurdy. Tony Flood.
Here.
Thank you. Reed Kempton.
Here.
Thank you. Jody Sorrell.
Here.
Thank you. William Beloit.
Here.
Thank you. Nina Arredondo.
Here.
Thank you. Heather Wilkie. Salvatore LaPuma. Ratna Korapella.
Here.
Thank you. Stephen Chang.
Here.
Thank you. Sam Stevenson. Gabe Elias.
Here.
Thank you. Carol Ketcherside.
Here.
Thank you. Grant Anderson. Chair Sapien.
Present.
Thank you. Are there any members that I missed?
Jason Crampton, City of Chandler.
Thank you, Jason. I think I heard someone else as well.
Jill Duesenberry, ADOT.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Sapien. We have quorum and you may proceed.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to item 2. An opportunity for public comment on the agenda was provided ahead of the meeting. MAG staff, do we have any public comments?
Chair, we did not receive any public comments. Thank you.
I'm hoping at least one will come in before my time as chair. One day we'll get one. All right, next item number 3, Transportation Planning Program Manager's Report. Hannah, it's my understanding Audra might be elsewhere, so if appropriate MAG staff can provide the Transportation Planning Program Manager's update on activities of general interest.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will be giving the MAG staff report today on behalf of Audra. First, I would like to congratulate Valley Metro on receiving $4 million for electric buses and to the City of Mesa for receiving $800,000 for bus shelters from congressionally directed spending. Additionally, as many of you are probably aware by now, MAG's Executive Director, Eric Anderson, is retiring from MAG. His last day will be July 1st. Eric has had a significant impact on this region and MAG staff over the past 40 years. We'll greatly miss him. With the news of Eric's retirement, the Regional Council selected Ed Zerker as the new executive director to lead the agency. Ed started on March 6th as the MAG managing executive director. He served the city of Phoenix for 28 years, including 8 years as city manager through 2021. We're all very excited to have Ed on board as part of the team. I also wanted to give an update on the Prop 400 extension. MAG staff and MAG leadership continue to look for an opportunity to get the extension of Prop 400 on the ballot. This remains our top priority and the reason that Audra can't join us today as she's down at the legislature. If you have any questions, please reach out to either Audra or John Bolin with any questions. And finally, I wanted to remind the committee that preparations for our annual joint meeting with MAG's Active Transportation Committee are underway. We're planning for an in-person hybrid optional meeting on June 5th, and we really hope that we can see many of you there in person on that date. So save the date. That completes my report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And I want to say we should give huge shout out and kudos to Audra and John, who have been diligent in monitoring anytime a bill comes up at the legislature. Relative to, I do my best to watch them live. Is approval of the February 6, 2023 Transit Committee meeting minutes. Do any members of the committee have questions or corrections to the minutes? If not, I will be happy to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Christine from Goodyear, second.
Thank you, Jody and Christine. Appreciate it. Hannah will do a roll call vote. Please indicate how you vote on the minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Jill Dusenberry.
Aye.
Thank you. Matt Dudley.
Aye.
Thank you. Jason Crampton.
Aye.
Thank you. Jose Macias.
Aye.
Thank you. Jeff Graves.
Aye.
Thank you. Don Coomer.
Approve.
Thank you. Stephanie Bubenheim.
Aye.
Thank you. Vice Chair Link.
Aye.
Thank you. Tony Flood.
Aye.
Thank you. Reed Kempton.
Approve.
Thank you. Jody Sorrell.
Aye.
Thank
Approve,
you.
whatever.
William Beloit.
Aye.
Thank you. Nina Arredondo.
Approve.
Thank you. Ratnakor Pella.
Yes.
Thank you. Stephen Chang.
Aye.
Thank you. Gabe Elias.
Aye.
Thank you. Carol Ketcherside.
Aye.
Thank you. Chair Sapien.
Aye.
Thank you. Are there any members that I missed?
Christine from Goodyear, I joined late.
Thank you, Christine, and I noted your attendance as well.
I vote aye.
Thank you. All right, with that, Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate your participation. We next move on to item number 5. Item number 5 on the agenda will be presented by Steph Stearns, MAG Transportation Planner. This item is on the agenda for action. Steph?
Good afternoon, Chair Sapien, members of the Transit Committee. I'm pleased to be here to present this item for action today. Next slide, please. And one more. Thank you. So starting off with an introduction of what the POP is, the POP, or the Program of Projects, is a list of transit projects for a given fiscal year that is reconciled with actual federal apportionments. The POP is developed with cooperation from our regional partners, the City of Phoenix and Valley Metro, and the programming is done in accordance with priorities outlined in the regional programming guidelines for federal transit formula funds. Next slide, please. Shown on the screen here is an overview of the POP process. It is nearly a year-long continuous process, starts every year in the winter, springtime. MAG, Phoenix Valley Metro begin development of the POP. Once FTA releases at annual apportionments, we reconcile with the apportionments, and then there is a continuous an overlapping process between MAG and City of Phoenix for MAG committee cycle approval and then Phoenix council cycle for approval. Following that, grants are then submitted to FTA in the summer or fall timeframe. Next slide, please. Shown on the screen here are the regional programming priorities. These come from the regional programming priorities for federal transit formula funds. It is a mouthful, but that is our policy document that guides how transit funding is programmed in the region. Next slide, please. In total, the MAG region has been apportioned nearly $155 million in FTA funding for fiscal year 2023. I'll go through each of these line items. So next slide, please. For our formula grants, we have been apportioned approximately $106 million. The notable projects that are programmed here include preventive maintenance, replacement and expansion vehicles, program administration, and system-wide improvements on the LRT system. And next slide, please. You'll notice in the POP document itself that there were some placeholders in 5307 and 5337. We know that we have additional needs coming up, but there are some moving pieces going on, some bus procurement, fleet transition plans. So while those moving pieces are up in the air, we've just got some placeholders. We'll come back later this fall once the dust has settled to discuss those funds. Next slide, please. Moving on to the Capital Investment Grant Program, South Central Extension has been awarded about $21 million. This is the final installment of federal funds for this project. Next slide, please. Each year, MAG completes a series of fund transfers through ADOT from the Federal Highway Administration to the Federal Transit Administration. We flex over Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program funds, also known as CMAQ. And we also flex over Surface Transportation Block Grant Program funds, also known as STBGP AZ Flex. One quick note for you here is that the STBGP apportionments are on a one-year delay, so the amount shown is for fiscal year 2022. Next slide, please. Finally, $4.8 million has been awarded to the MAG region, like Hannah mentioned in the manager's report today. So another congratulations to both City of Mesa and Valley Metro, who were successful in getting this congressionally directed spending awarded. Just a note for the committee, congressionally directed spending funds are or were directly requested by member agencies through their congressional representatives, and the funding that's awarded is specific to the project named. Next slide, please. In closing, I will note that there's approximately nearly $27 million in prior year funding that is being used to meet current year obligations. The way this works is that as projects close out, as there are cost savings, maybe projects canceled or defer, funding becomes available. And since funding is awarded to projects and not to agencies, the funds are available for reprogramming. A great example of this is that the City of Phoenix's allocation of preventive maintenance for this current year, 2023, is actually being met using old STBGP AZ Flex funds. So this is very much just a programming exercise. We make sure that we are using our oldest money first. Next slide, please. Following today's meeting, the POP will go through the MAG committee cycle with anticipated regional council approval on June 28th. Next slide, please. Chair Sapien and members of the committee, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steph. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
Chair Sapien, this is Matt Dudley Avenue. I got a question.
Go right ahead, sir.
Steph, real quick on congressionally directed spending, how does that work for like MAG and the TIP? So do you only put it in the TIP once you receive that? How does that work? How does the
Yes.
process work?
Chair Sapien, Mr. Dudley, members of the committee, yes, that is correct. The Valley Metro and Mesa funds, they were included in this past year's THUD bill, the Transportation and Housing Urban Development, not positive on the acronym, but the bill did come out earlier this year. Once we see that it's in some actual federal legislation, that the funds are, quote, real, and we can point to, here's a document, here's a page number, that's when we would then put them in the TIP. So
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Anyone else have any questions? If not, I will take a motion to approve this item.
Motion to approve, Matt Dudley Avondale.
Thank you, Matt. Do I hear a second?
Second, from Jody and Mesa.
Thank you, Jody. Hannah, I assume you will take roll call on this item.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start the roll with Jill Dusenberry.
Aye.
Thank you. Matt Dudley.
Aye.
Thank you. Sean Banda.
Aye.
Thank you. Jason Crampton.
Aye.
Thank you. Jose Macias.
Aye.
Thank you. Jeff Graves.
Aye.
Thank you. Don Coomer.
Yes.
Thank you. Stephanie Bubenheim.
Aye.
Thank you. Vice Chair Link.
Aye.
Thank you. Christine McMurdy.
Aye.
Thank you. Tony Flood.
Aye.
Thank you. Reed Kempton.
Aye.
Thank you. Jody Sorrell.
Aye.
Thank you. William Beloit.
Aye.
Thank you. Nina Arredondo.
Aye.
Thank you. Ratnakor Pella.
Aye.
Thank you. Stephen Chang.
Aye.
Thank you. Gabe Elias.
Aye.
Thank you. Carol Ketcherside.
Aye.
Thank you. Chair Sapien.
Aye.
Thank you. Are there any members that I missed? All right, hearing none. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you so much, everybody. Moving along, item number 6 on the agenda will be presented by Steph Stearns. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion.
Thank you, Chair Sapien. If we could have the next slide, please. And then one more. Thank you. So let's start off with why the census matters for transit funding, why I'm here today. The population count and the boundaries that are derived from each decennial census are then used as inputs to federal formulas. Our annual apportionments or the buckets of money that then come to the region are what come out of these formulas. So census, very important here. Next slide, please. Some quick history of where we're at based on the 2010 census. So this map here shown on the left, these are the 2010 MAG boundaries. And then these bullet points on the left are as of the last census. So as of last census, Phoenix Mesa Urbanized Area, or UZA, was categorized as a large urbanized area. And then the Avondale Goodyear UZA, which is the kind of peach, pink, tan, depending on your screen, and the left and the west part of the valley here was a small urbanized area. The key difference between sizes here and why it matters is because it has to do with the flexibility of federal funds and allowable uses. Next slide, please. As with everything MAG does, you have seen this slide already today, We let policy dictate our decision-making. MAG follows the regional programming priorities as approved in the regional programming guidelines for federal transit formula funds when programming transit funds. Next slide, please. The Federal Transit Administration, or the FTA, allocates formula funding nationwide to eligible areas based on population, population density, and then depending on the program type or the fund type, transit systems in the area. So shown here on the screen are the programs under which the MAG region is apportioned. This includes the 5307 program, the 5310, 5337, and 5339 programs. And the criteria for receiving these funds is also shown on the screen. They are typically population driven. And then for the State of Good Repair program, you do need that extra component of a dedicated busway or a fixed guideway. Next slide, please. So shown here on the screen, I'll take a minute to orient you. This is a table comparing the 2010 census results and population count to the 2020. So you'll notice here right off the bat, there's some changes to area names. Populations have obviously changed, and then FTA fund program eligibility have changed. Right here at the top of the screen, the Maricopa urban area. This is new. This is new to our area. Created as a result of the 2020 census. The area around Maricopa having exceeded 50,000 population is why it has been created. You'll also note some differences here between 2010 and 2020. In 2010, they used the term urbanized area, while in 2020, the term is urban area. This is just a nomenclature thing led by the census. It's the way they are naming or calling areas. This nomenclature has nothing to do with how funding is apportioned, and rather that is population driven. So that's the right side of the table here. And you can see how population changes, particularly to the area formerly known as Avondale Goodyear, now known as Phoenix West Goodyear Avondale. Population exceeds 400,000. It is now categorized as a large urbanized area. And some new funding types that we'll be seeing in the region are 5310 funds and 5339 funds. Those will be apportioned to the new areas beginning next year. And then just a final note here that there are implications based on these changes. So like I just discussed, the changes will take effect with the 2024 apportionments. So that'll be here next year. And there are some anticipated policy discussions that will need to happen. So we'll be back later this fall to discuss more in depth. Next slide, please. Shown here on the slide is a side-by-side comparison of the 2010 boundaries on the left and then the 2020 boundaries here on the right. Like I previously mentioned, big difference is Maricopa urban area coming in as new. And then another pretty big shift here is the way that the boundary has shifted between the Phoenix West urban area out in the West Valley to the Phoenix Mesa urban area. So it's shifted considerably, I'd say 4 to 8 miles, depending on exactly where to the east. So a large portion of the city of Phoenix and then the city of Tolleson are now included in this Phoenix West urban area. Next slide, please. And you may have noticed in some of the 2020 maps that they're not very smooth. There's islands and kind of chunks of land hanging out. And this is because these maps reflect raw census data of population density as of April 1st, 2020. So they reflect a point in time. Federal guidance then allows for states and local areas to smooth the boundaries of where federal funds can be used. This does not impact the population count. This does not impact funding that comes into the region. It just prevents a weird instance where like there's a couple mile stretch of I-10 here in the West Valley that's not surrounded by that tan peach shade. It obviously makes no sense to say, sorry, no federal funds can be used there. So the smoothing allows us to fill in those gaps, allows federal funding to be used in a way that makes sense. ADOT is the agency that leads the smoothing process, and this is done so with guidance from Federal Highway Administration and input from MAG as well. So this is something that will come through the MAG committee process later this year. And then another reminder that these changes do go into effect next year, and further discussions on the policy implications are expected later this spring or summer. Next slide, please. Again, this discussion is just for information and discussion. It's really intended to be a primer on future policy discussions, future changes that we are expecting as a result of the 2020 census. And there is more to come. That concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steph. I see Carol has her hand up, but let's go to Carol's question, and then anyone else, if you want to indicate somehow, either by raising your hand or putting in the chat, that you may have a question for MAG staff. Carol, go ahead. You're on mute, Carol.
Sorry, I unmuted and then I muted myself. Can you go back to slide 27, please? So I'm looking at the white space that's between the peach color and the blue color. And I know you explained the smoothing stuff, but so will those two colors literally come together like they do more around where Interstate 10 is? Will all that white space between the two colors just somehow be smoothed and go away?
Chair Sapien, Ms. Ketraside, and members of the committee, yes, that is what we anticipate. The smoothing process led by ADOT typically draws a 1 mile buffer around each area. Here where we have kind of the blue and peach near each other, I'm sure it's going to involve some work with ADOT and MAG, just saying where does it make sense to have these boundaries lie if there's less than a mile in between the two, if you get what I'm saying there.
And is that likely to then follow city limit lines wherever they exist?
It can, yes. The boundary is typically 1 mile. It does allow for exceptions, and we do consider land ownership in that.
And is that it's a transit activity driven decision, even though ADOT's making it? It's not driven by highway activity?
So it's done. Thank you, Chair Sapien, members of the committee. The smoothing process is meant for the use of all of our federal funds. So it's not specific to transit or highway. It's just federal funds in general. So the same smooth map that is used for transit funding will be the same smooth maps, same smooth boundaries as highway funding.
So it sounds like it could not make much sense for transit. I'm just thinking out loud. Discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey,
Thank
Sue,
you.
this is Matt in Avondale.
Go ahead, Matt.
Steph, what was the census thinking about not even just, why didn't they combine the boundaries for both Phoenix and Phoenix West, Goodyear, Avondale? Did they give you guys a reason why?
Yes, Chair Sapien, Mr. Dudley, members of the committee. Leading up to the 2020 census, the Census Bureau actually did release some criteria on how they would consider merging urbanized areas. So based on all of their criteria, which was about population density, commute flows, and patterns, every sign pointed to these two urban areas being merged together. However, what wasn't made as clear is that the software or the computer program, whatever the Census Bureau itself uses to crunch the numbers, it operated with a given that if an area existed in 2010, it would exist in 2020. And their kind of rationale for that was talking about the whole northeastern corridor, like Boston down to Washington, D.C., because that would have made for some super mega urban areas. So it works for the East Coast. The West Coast just kind of has to deal.
You just have to kind of catch up to it.
Yes.
And then when we talk policy decisions, so now this section of it gets 5310 and 5339. Previously, the 5310 process was an ADOT process, but now that it's a large urban area, that's being incorporated into the MAG as another process, or will it be absorbed into the larger current process of 5310?
Chair Sapien, Mr. Dudley, I'd say more to come on this. MAG is still working out exactly how that is going to work. Based on our estimates, it looks like there will be two distinct apportionments. So there will be a 5310 Phoenix Mesa Scottsdale apportionment, a 5310 Phoenix West Goodyear Avondale apportionment. And then as far as the programming of the funds, the way we run the call for projects, the way that the grants are administered. It looks like that's still going to be cooperative between MAG and City of Phoenix, but I'll just say more to come later this summer, this fall.
All right. Thank you very much, Steph.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Any other members have a question? Carol, you have another one?
Yes, sir, I do. Thank you. I remember discussions going on about the area where Australia Mountain Ranch is south of I-10, and that potentially emerging as its own yet another urbanized area. What's the status of that?
So if we could go back to slide, just go back like one slide, 2 slides, 28. Yeah, this works. So that Australia Mountain Ranch, that's a South Goodyear area. Is that correct?
Oh, that's what I'm thinking of, unless I have it wrong.
Yeah.
The wrong name, but that's what I'm thinking of, yes.
Yeah, so what this map shows is any urbanized area greater than 50,000. It could be that the Australia area has grown, but the population didn't exceed 50,000. So at this time, we're not expecting or anticipating an urban area, but maybe in 2030, things could look a little different.
And is it, this is speculation, but is it likely to be its own urban area, or is it likely to get added to the Phoenix, West Goodyear, Avondale?
The Chair Sapien, members of the committee, it's hard to answer that question at this time. What the census looks for is contiguous land development patterns. So if it looks like everything's close enough, it would likely just be absorbed or added on to Phoenix, West Goodyear, Avondale. If it's perceived as being a big gap, it would be separate. But at this point, I think it's a little too hard to tell what the development's going to look like in 2030 when the next census is done.
Thanks.
Thank you, Carol. Anyone else have questions? I've got a couple, but I wanted to make sure everyone had the opportunity first.
Sure.
So Steph, my questions, I'm assuming that there was a smoothing process done in 2010 as well, correct? And that's kind of what we're all living with today?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. My other question is, any feedback or reaction yet from City of Maricopa? What they plan to do relative to now having this designation and what they might be thinking?
Chair Sapien, at this time, I can't speak for Maricopa and what they're thinking. I know that they have been notified, and it's something that we'll all have to work together on. But at this point, I don't know which way they're leaning.
Okay, yeah, my question basically was, have you received any feedback from them yet so far? Because yeah, I know they got notified. Okay.
Thank you.
Because they are kind of out there in terms of one way in, one way out. What are they going to use this money for? Yeah. Anyone else have any questions before we move on? And Steph, I'll wrap up with this presentation or something very similar to it is going to work its way through other MAG committees to begin informing all the member cities at higher levels, correct?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. So everyone on this call, you should just know that the same presentation will move forward to some extent. Last call. Anyone have any questions on this?
Hey, Chair, this is Sean from City of Buckeye.
Go ahead, Sean.
So the new boundary, and I know this sounds foolish not to know, but the new 2020 census actually includes less of Buckeye compared to the 2010. I don't know what impact that would have on us receiving any funding because all of our downtown and our major projects are outside of even the smoothing area.
Sean, was there a question in there? It sounded more of just...
Yeah, what impact would that have? Because it actually seems to be less of Buckeyes included. So what impact would that have on our funding opportunities?
Chair Sapien, members of the committee, at this time, it's a little hard to say. I think we would need to wait for our smoothed maps to come out. Like I mentioned, it's typically a 1 mile buffer that can be a little more, a little less, depending on the circumstances. So at this point, Sean, I don't think I can answer that question. We'll just have to wait till we get some more information from ADOT on our smoothing process.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, staff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, and within the transit industry, I know this is happening across the country and everyone has the same question, Sean. What impact, if anything, will this have for my city, my county, my service? TBD, I guess, is what I would say, because it has been a point of discussion all over the industry recently, because there was a lot of places that lost population. We gained. So it's really interesting to see what's going on. And you can actually go to the FTA website and there is an Excel sheet that is downloadable to show you what happened in each and every UZA in growth and shrinkage. So very interesting. If there's no more questions, thank you so much, Steph. Very good overview. And I look forward to this working its way through other committees so that our bosses and electeds are educated on what's going on.
Thank you, Chair.
Item number 70 on the agenda will be presented by Marty Zick with Valley Metro. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion, and I am always a big fan of Marty's presentations because he's enthusiastic, his presentations are colorful and chock full of information. Marty, take it away.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Chair Sapien, members of the Transit Committee, I am here to talk about Valley Metro's quality of life study. The most recent iteration of it we put together in 2022. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to read this text, but just to kind of paraphrase, essentially what we as an agency look to do through this report is demonstrate our commitment to improving the quality of life in Metro Phoenix. And that's both for transit riders as well as people that aren't necessarily ones that use our system. So we want to show that not only do we run buses and trains and paratransit and vanpool, but we really do have a larger impact on Metro Phoenix as a whole. So this report is something that we put together approximately every 3 to 5 years. This is the second iteration. The third iteration we anticipate in kind of that 2025 to 2027 timeframe. And last thing I'll say on this slide, we, in this iteration, split the data points that we collected into 4 different categories. And so I'm going to be giving examples of all 4 of those categories in the forthcoming slides. Next slide, please. So to start out, the first category I'm going to go through is what we're calling responding to the Valley's needs. And this is really just looking at just what's happening throughout the region on kind of a macro scale. And so the first thing that we did for each one of these categories is identified those data points that aren't necessarily transit related, but that are things that we can then kind of look at and see how Valley Metro impacts those. So just a selection from that. Oh, and one other thing I'll point out before going into the data itself, you're going to see some of these blue kind of virus looking icons on different data points. And what that indicates is that those data points were impacted by the COVID pandemic. So I'll go into a little bit of information on those as we go through. So the first one, drivers spent $1.5 billion and 68 million hours in congestion in 2020. The point I'll raise with this is that's actually down from prior to COVID, and we are back up to even more in terms of both the amount of money that's wasted and time spent in congestion as we've recovered from the pandemic. During the period of 2009 to 2017, Metro Phoenix added over the city of Phoenix added over 65,000 jobs. And in the outlying cities, growth also boomed. So essentially, we are seeing growth in both our urban core as well as in some of the peripheral communities. And then last piece on this slide, our vehicle miles traveled increased over 60% in the time frame between 2000 and 2019. So a lot more cars on the road, and the distances that people drive typically increased as well. Next slide. So that kind of second point in this, seeing that data from the previous slide, how does Valley Metro contribute and help the region as we're confronting some of these problems? So the first piece, during COVID, Valley Metro continued to connect communities and provide a high level of service for essential workers. We strove, as well as the city of Phoenix and all other operators in this region, to maintain our network as completely as possible so that we were serving those essential workers as well as just all of the other essential tasks that people had to go to, regardless of their ability to drive or own a car, throughout the COVID pandemic. And we did it in a way that maintained safety to the best extent possible as well. We provided more than 1 million annual paratransit trips during the pandemic years, and also over 50 million bus and light rail trips. So this is, again, another one to point out with the COVID pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, and then also in the newest data that we're seeing, those numbers are once again going back up. So that was kind of during the height of the pandemic, we were still providing a significant amount of mobility to people throughout the region. And then finally, the last piece here, we look at frequent service routes. So these are bus routes and rail routes that run at 15-minute frequency or better. And we note that those routes do have significantly higher ridership. So when there's more service, people ride. However, they only account for about 16% of our total routes. So it's something that we're constantly looking at and trying to see which potential additional routes could qualify for adding some more frequent service. Next slide, please. The next category we're looking at is improving communities through transit. So what we looked at in terms of what's happening in the region here is just what is this growth looking like? So in the decade of the 2010s, we saw the region grow by almost 16% in terms of population. The employment in that same decade increased by almost 500,000 jobs in the region. And the correlation there is that we're seeing a lot of growth, both in terms of people moving here as well as jobs coming here. However, we're not really keeping up in terms of adding housing units. So we added over 150,000 housing units in that decade, but that was only a 9% housing growth compared to an almost 16% population growth. Next slide, please. In terms of how Valley Metro contributes to this growth, we identified over $1.2 billion of non-transit infrastructure improvements that took place with our light rail corridor construction since 2006. So this looks at improving and replacing underground utilities, adding better bike and pedestrian amenities along these corridors, shade, and then just improving the safety of the roads as well, so that when you have rail running down the same road as cars and all of the other uses, you can see an improved just streetscape in general. We saw, now this is not Valley Metro, this is everything but Valley Metro, over $16 billion in economic investments in the light rail corridor, the vast majority of which came from the private sector. And then finally, when you look at our frequent service network, so again, that's that 16% of our routes that run at 15-minute frequency or better, there's almost 600,000 jobs that are located within a 10-minute walk, a half-mile walk of where those frequent service routes stop. Next slide, please. In terms of prioritizing riders, and this is just looking at travel patterns, we see that Maricopa County residents spend an average of 20% of their income on transportation, and that is higher than the national average, mainly due to what we saw on some of the previous slides, that we just have a very large area and people are commuting large distances, which just adds expense, both in terms of vehicle maintenance, gas, et cetera, et cetera. We also see a disproportionate amount of pedestrian fatalities occur in Maricopa County. So 80% within the whole state are in Maricopa County. And then finally, out of the Proposition 400 funds, about 630 million get generated annually and split amongst the modes. Transit receives a third. So next slide, please. How does Valley Metro contribute to those certain sets of facts? We're really working to improve our rider experience. To do so, we have worked to improve our vehicle tracking, and now we have real time that people can use to see exactly where their buses and trains will be available to riders in the Valley Metro app. Since 2015, we have ensured that pedestrian and bike access and safety are really crucial as we continue to grow our system. And so the number here is that since 2015, we have seen over $16 million in specific identified bike ped improvements that come with our light rail station construction. And then finally, on this piece, sharethерide.com. So this is looking at all the different types of carpool, vanpool, remote work, all of the different types of ways to reduce those miles on the road, we have seen that people that are active with that program, sharethерide.com, saved over $2 million in 2019 and $4.5 million in 2020 by using alternative modes. Next slide, please. And then finally, the last category, what we're calling benefiting the Valley, is just looking at what are some of those major pieces of what it's like to live here and what we're seeing in the future, and then how can public transit help to address that? So the first piece here, we're seeing that this region is heating up. From 2000 to 2014, the average annual temperature rose anywhere between 4 and 13 degrees, depending on the year. In terms of how transit can kind of help to address air quality, as well as some of the just kind of aspects of why our heat is rising as fast as it is, we look at that, yes, Valley Metro only carries about 2% of all commuters in this region, but the real positive here is that to carry that 2% of commuters, we only contribute 0.4% of greenhouse gas emissions. So just looking at what that means in kind of the macro scale, a transit rider is essentially emitting about 1/5 of the greenhouse gas to get where they need to go than someone who doesn't use transit. And then finally, the one other piece here, again, along with our heat rising, is that we see that the number of days with poor air quality in this region have doubled since 2013. So next slide, please. How is Valley Metro contributing to this and helping to improve our situation? As I mentioned on the previous slide, by riding public transit, people are saving emissions. So we see that Valley Metro actually displaces more emissions than it creates by providing shared mode transit. If all those people on our system would be driving in individual vehicles, we would see a lot more pollution. We are identifying that, yes, heat is a challenge in this region, but we need to really ensure that we're providing the best possible experience for riders. To do so, we see that about 94% of our high-use bus stops have shade, and there are plans to improve that number even further by our member cities. And then finally, the last piece here, we see that very few criteria pollutants, which are some of the worst forms, are created by our vehicles, namely that our trains are powered by electricity, and our buses, for the most part, are powered by alternative fuels and also just hybrid battery buses. And we see that at about 69% of our total fleet. Next slide, please. So for more information, we have a website, valleymetro.org/quality of life. All of this information that was presented today in the presentation is on that site, as well as quite a bit more. Thank you, Chair, members of the committee, and I look forward to taking any questions.
Thank you so much, Marty. You did not disappoint. Does anyone have any questions for Marty? Very, very good stuff. Very interesting report. Any questions?
Yes, Chair Sapien, I have a few questions.
Go right ahead, Ms. Sorrell.
Hey, Marty, this was a very timely presentation because I just actually pulled up the report this morning for a couple talking points for Mayor Giles. So I appreciate the timing for clarifying. I have a couple things I just want to get clarified. When you reference a frequent service network, how do you define frequent service?
Chair Sapien, members of the committee, so we do that through the transit standards and performance measures, and I can definitely get that document over to you. But as it states, it's essentially 15-minute or better all-day frequency.
Okay. Yeah, that's what it's the 15-minute I just needed to know. And then when you talk about the $1.2 billion in non-transit infrastructure, that's not SIMPAs that cities added. That's other infrastructure that we pay for to move, correct?
Chair Sapien, members of the committee, Jody, I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. I'll write the question down and get the.
Yeah, I just wanted a clarification on that one.
All right, thank you so much, Jody. Anyone else? All right, thank you so much. Marty, will this be presented at future Valley Metro meetings, I assume?
Chair Sapien, if it's requested, we absolutely will present it.
Okay. Only reason I'm wondering is because Blue Crowley is going to ask for the data on the 94% of coverage at high use bus stops. So be prepared.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marty. Appreciate the overview. We will now move on. Item 8 on the agenda will be presented by Stephanie Rangel, City of Phoenix Lead Federal Grants Accountant. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion. Stephanie, take it away.
Thank you, Chairman Sapien and committee members. As you know, the City of Phoenix is the designated recipient of FTA funds for the region and the direct recipient for the old Avondale Goodyear UZA. And in your information, you should have received the report for any of the open grants that the region has. I'm here to answer any questions or any items you'd want to discuss.
Does anyone have any questions for Stephanie based on the information distributed in the report? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Chair.
Moving on, item number 9, request for future agenda items. Are there any requests by a committee member for a future agenda item? See, Hannah, this is what happens when we have the meetings right after lunch. Everyone's kind of off in a little bit of a daze. Item number 10, member agency updates. Are there any updates or announcements by committee members they'd like to share with the team? All right, seeing none. The next meeting date, a reminder to committee members that our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, May 1st, 2023 at 1 p.m. and that will also be via teleconference. With no further business, the meeting of the MAG Transit Committee is now adjourned at 1:52 p.m.